Almost a perfect airliner that everyone liked. Almost a perfect airliner that was produced for only a decade and marked the end of its famous creator. Hello aviators, Sky here, and today we will try to understand why the plane that was supposed to become a bestseller suffered such a sad failure. Today we meet the Fokker 100. At the end of the 1970s, the Dutch aviation company Fokker felt quite confident. They collaborated with world leaders, participated in a variety of projects, and had a respectable line of civil aircraft, most notably the F-27 French ship turboprop and the F-28 fellowship jet. The F-28 was especially pleasing. The successful regional airliner at one time pushed aside many piston and turboprop oldies and successfully competed with modern aircraft, offering comfort, efficiency, and excellent takeoff and landing performance, significantly expanding the number of airports to which it could fly. But there is always a but. The industry was evolving, new technologies were emerging, and airline requirements were changing. On the one hand, the demand for the old model was declining, while a new competitor appeared. In the UK, the Avro RJ was taking shape, which later became known as the BAE 146, and next to it, the F-28 looked unimpressive. On the other hand, there was a good chance to increase their influence in the regional market, since large manufacturers were clearly more interested in the medium-haul niche. The path was obvious: a new plane. Studying the concept was difficult, the market was changing, and it was not entirely clear what kind of aircraft should be made. There were many ideas, from the modernization of the F-28 to joint projects with Boeing and McDonnell Douglas, and the creation of a completely new machine like the F-29 project, similar to the Boeing 737 but with a T-tail. After lengthy studies and negotiations, Fokker nevertheless decided to stay on the F-28 base, initiating the internal project F-28-0100 with an increase in capacity and range, 109 seats, 2.5 to 3,000 kilometers. With the right selection of parameters, it was possible to stand on the step between smaller turboprops like the ATRs and their own Fokker 50s, and larger jetliners like the MD-80, Boeing 737 and A320. This niche was estimated at more than 750 aircraft, and considering that they would have to compete only with the BAE 146, the aviators decided that it was worth it. The F-28-4000 modification, the largest of the fellowship family, was chosen as the base for the future airliner. The fuselage was elongated, but the diameter was not changed, it was already quite wide. The aircraft received a new wing of increased span and area. Despite the fact that in terms of the general layout and devices the picture has practically not changed, even the familiar ridges were retained. The aerodynamics were significantly improved, which made it possible to maintain the takeoff and landing performance of the heavier aircraft and slightly improve the performance at the cruising speed. The T-shaped tail was retained, but the stabilizer was slightly enlarged. The aerodynamic brake, made up of two split flaps, is also still here. The aviators really liked it. The landing gear is classic, tricycle. All bogies are two-wheeled. Higher pressure in the front wheels, lower in the wheels of the main gear. These solutions, also with the addition of reverse thrust, allowed the aircraft to operate on airfields with runways only about 15 to 1600 meters long, in principle even on unpaved ones. The cabin has a width of 3.1 meters, only 1 centimeter narrower than the DC-9, which is a lot for a small regional plane and is good for comfort. Layout: 5 seats in a row. Capacity: 97 seats in a two-class layout and up to 122 in a dense single-class layout, on par with early Boeing 737s and DC-9s. There was no competition, the timing was good. The heirs of Boeing and Douglas, who appeared in the early 1980s, were already larger and worked in a different niche. The remaining elements are standard, give or take. In front, there are two main doors to the left and right of the fuselage, a lavatory and a galley, then the main cabin, which has 4 more emergency exits to the wing on both sides, and the second lavatory in the tail. The air conditioning system in its layout is also a legacy of the F-28, with a pair of small intakes in the nose. Something similar could be seen on the DC-8. The cockpit was very progressive for its time. The control system received a full set of auxiliary systems and excessive automation. The cockpit is designed for 2 crew members, equipped with yokes, and a digital flight system with 6 displays. Very cool for the early 1980s. The glazing, in principle, was carried over from the F28, except that they got rid of the upper windows. They had already lost their relevance by that time. Fokker announced Project 100 in 1983. The work was quite complex, and the problem was not in technology, but this time in industrial capabilities. The company and factories were still quite busy. Plus, there was more than one new project. While one team was making the Fokker 100, the successor to the F28, the second team in parallel was making the Fokker 50, the successor to the F27. The guys swung wide and simply didn't have enough hands to do everything at once. The prototype was assembled by 1986, and in November it made its maiden flight. Then everything went faster. Already at the end of 1987 the plane was certified. At the factories it almost immediately replaced the F28. Production of the Fokker Fellowship was closed at around 241 aircraft. Sales at the initial stage were great. In 1988, the Fokker 100 entered the fleet of its launch customer, Swiss Air. The Brazilian TAM was waiting for 50 aircraft. And then the Americans came. US Airways ordered 40 aircraft, and American Airlines ordered as many as 75. The $3.1 billion contract was very large, and an all-time record for Fokker. At this time, it continued to wrestle with the BAE 146, and at times it got ridiculous. The two regionals were practically neck and neck, and at first, the feature of the 146 was the lowest noise level among all jet airliners of that time. The plane was even called the Whisper Jet. But it soon became clear that the Fokker, if not quieter, was certainly no louder than its colleague, which, let's say, upset the British fans. The basic Fokker 100 was originally built with a maximum takeoff weight of 43 tons and a range of 2,450 kilometers. The volume of the fuel tanks was decent, more than 13,000 liters, and the caveat was that with a full commercial load, the plane could not be 100% fueled. This phenomenon is quite common and was not considered a problem. The routes in Europe were not particularly long. But for the USA, this was not enough, and they had to play with the plane. The takeoff weight was increased to 45.8 tons, and this addition was given to the tanks, thanks to which the range reached 3,170 kilometers. The fiery heart of the Fokker 100 is a pair of Rolls-Royce Tays suspended in its tail. It was the latest engine at that time, with excellent performance, which in addition to Fokkers was very popular with Gulfstream business jets. On the F100, two versions could be installed, with thrusts of 62 and 67 kilonewtons, the basic one for the regular version and the boosted one, respectively for the heavier version. The performance was excellent. Compared to the F28 engines, thrust increased by 40 to 50%, while maintaining good economy and the ability to work in hot and high conditions. In flights, everything's the same as with the others. Speed 845 km per hour, service ceiling 11 km. In the early 1990s, Fokker already had a portfolio of orders of approximately 230 units, an excellent start. It seemed that the Fokker 100 would become a bestseller and turn its creator into one of the world leaders. But then something went wrong. The costs of the program turned out to be higher than planned, and this problem could have been mitigated with high sales. But the beginning of the 1990s was marked by a wave of large-scale financial crises in different countries, which undermined the conditions of many airlines and sharply reduced demand. At the same time, competitive pressure increased sharply. The Embraer ERJ and Canadair CRJ regional planes appeared, which did not offer large cabins and capabilities, but were newer, cheaper, and more economical. Great hopes were placed on the Fokker 70, a modification of the 100 with minor system improvements, shortened fuselage, and a capacity of up to 85 seats. The plane took off in 1993 and was certified in 1994. The first aircraft delivered was a VIP version for the Ford Motor Company, and the bet on the American market was high. The Dutch even made a 70-seat version to meet the requirements of local airlines. But alas, this time there was no great demand from the USA. Airlines from Southeast Asia paid much attention to the aircraft, but the supplies there were also minimal, and the initial customer, the Indonesian Simpati Air, soon stopped flying and went bankrupt. Fokker's financial condition was rapidly deteriorating. In 1993, the net loss was about $122 million, and in 1994 it was already $358 million. Now it would be about $750 million. Fokker went through several rounds of restructuring and optimization, with division closures and mass layoffs. At the same time, they were actively looking for partners and conducting negotiations with companies from different countries: Germany, Canada, and even South Korea. But the results were modest. The ship was frankly sinking. The result of all this torment was collapse. Production effectively ceased in 1997. At that time, 47 units of the F-70 were produced, and 283 of 100s. Fokker, a company whose history stretched all the way back to 1912, practically ceased to exist. Some of its fragments were absorbed, and some became independent companies. What can I say? It's a pity. The plane in this story fell victim to economic and corporate storms, while being in itself an excellent machine. We are not even talking about conceptual errors. Yes, the Canadian and Brazilian aircraft have narrower fuselage and lower capacity, which became their bonus at that time. But with the economic recovery of the early 2000s, we saw many new planes with close solutions, some of which are very close. If Fokker had withstood the blows of fate at that time, who knows? Maybe the Model 100 would still be one of the main players on the market. Even by modern standards, the airliner is not bad at all. The already produced aircraft, I note, even after the collapse of the manufacturer, continued to fly, and even acquired a kind of fan base. Their technical support continued with the ex-Fokker splinter companies, who even managed to make modifications, converting them into cargo and VIP jetliners. As of 2020, approximately 120 Fokker 100s and 40 Fokker 70s remain in service. At least one plane became a flying lab. The French re-equipped it, called it ABENG, and used it as a test platform for equipment, for example, elements and systems of Rafale fighter jets. In addition, almost immediately after the end of production, various initiatives began to appear to resume it. Attempts have been made for a long time by private companies and large organizations, but so far there are no results. I don't know if it makes sense to do this now. It's the mid-2020s. Let's be honest, time has passed. In the meantime, let Fokker continue to delight fans until retirement, with fast flights and soft landings.